I'd like to start out this video by pointing out something that theists and atheists are both guilty of. That is basing their belief or disbelief on a personal experience that caused a strong emotional reaction. May have been the death of a family member. Why did God allow it? These types of things. For a theist, perhaps they prayed, their prayer was answered. Instead of attributing it to chance, they attribute it to God. These personal experiences, while very convincing to us, are not going to persuade any other people. There has to be an element of that experience that somebody can investigate for themselves. For example, suppose I told you that my personal experience is that living a moral life has a direct correspondence with feeling God's presence. Now that may not be proof, but it's something that you can investigate for yourself. You could open the Bible, look at the various moral precepts, obey them, and see if God's presence is any clearer to you. But if I said that God spoke to me and told me He exists, therefore you should believe, well, there's no way for you to investigate that for yourself. And if you're an atheist who has read, I don't know, some peer-reviewed journal that a logician wrote, pointing out flaws in weak arguments for God's existence, well, maybe I can't understand that argument. Maybe there's no way for me to investigate it. Maybe I don't have access to the peer-reviewed journals. They cost money. So we always have to meet in the middle in a real communication and where a real investigation is possible, either empirically or at least by a thought experiment or logically. Now, one atheist argument that I see very often is that God does not exist because His actions in the Bible or in the Quran or in this book or that book are immoral. Now, I don't think that that's the case, but suppose they are. That does not prove the non-existence of something. If I behave badly, it doesn't prove that I don't exist. There's an argument that theists use that is often baffling to me. Remember, there was a friend of mine who was Greek Orthodox, and his way of convincing people of his religion was to say how beautiful it was. You walk into a church, wow, look how beautiful these images are. Well, if that were the case, then I should base a religion entirely on Times Square in New York City, because I happen to think that Times Square is beautiful. I like the lights. Does that mean that I should base a religion on it? Or, if you prefer the beauty of nature to man-made things, then why not be a pantheist? So when a theist argues that their religion is beautiful, look how wonderful it makes you feel, that's no argument at all. Now, on the atheist side of the arguments, there's one that often comes up that people fight over religions. Look at all the wars that are fought over religion. Again, that does not prove that God does not exist. Men fight over women all the time. Does that prove that women don't exist? See, when you apply that reasoning to other things, it makes absolutely no sense. Then why should we apply it to religion? Is something false because a person fights over it? Can we think of a million examples that people fight over? People fight over food. Does food not exist? Stupid. Now, the biggest fallacy that I've seen theists commit is to argue with an atheist from the Bible to prove God's existence. The atheist does not take the Bible on faith, nor the Quran, no other authoritative book. Therefore, merely asserting out of authority that something exists is not going to prove it. For an atheist who is arguing with a Christian, for example, the atheist would say, well, why not the Quran? Why believe that the Bible is the authoritative book? So unless there's an agreement on common ground... Now, for the theist, I have something to say to you. Look at Romans 1:20. It says that God's existence can be known through natural reasoning. That means there's no special divine revelation required to prove God's existence. And an atheist is looking for that natural explanation. They're not looking for divine revelation. So if you're a theist, stop using that argument. Now, there is one atheist argument that's a pretty strong one, and St. Thomas talks about it in the Summa Theologica, in his second objection to the existence of God. And that is that things could be explained without God. And it seems that atheists think that theists believe in God as some sort of primitive way to explain things. But that's not the case. Even if everything had a natural explanation, we still need to explain why anything exists at all as opposed to nothing. And God is a necessary being. The theist posits God as a necessary being. The universe we live in isn't the way it is necessarily. It could have been some other way. It could have been created out of all antimatter instead of matter. Scientists don't know why it's mostly matter, for example. So it's not, the universe isn't a necessary configuration. Whereas God's attributes is that he's necessary. Now, theists, again, a lot of them reject science because they think it's a threat to their religion. But really it's not. And they need to stop doing that because it makes them look like fools. And, me making comments like that is why people get riled up. But St. Augustine said the exact same thing. So if you're going to pick on me, pick on him too. The point I'm making is that science itself is a good thing. Technology is a good thing. If the theist rants about how bad technology is, how bad science is, they're not making an argument for theism. They're simply looking foolish, because theology itself is a science, and the study of Scripture itself is a science. Now, an atheist would disagree, because by science, they're thinking empirical science. But this is very important, because beliefs such as the world being only 6,000 years old, things like that, really interfere with things, or arguing about evolution. Those things do not disprove the existence of God either way. Even if, say I was a pagan, and say somebody said, well, according to what we know in science, Zeus can't exist. I could still hold on to my religion by saying that Zeus is a metaphor for part of our personality. As a matter of fact, all the Greek gods are. If you look at Zeus and Hera and all these different Greek gods, they basically represent different personalities or different parts of the human character. And that's not to say that I'm a pagan, but that means that there is some truth in their religion, but it's a symbolic truth. And it's odd, because atheists almost seem to have a hard time accepting symbolism. But we see symbolism all the time. And what symbolism is a visible image that represents something invisible, like math, okay? Numbers. The number, the square root of -1, what does that look like? Well, we could draw its symbol, and it has a certain reality. Well, that's the type of thing we're talking about here, but a little bit more transcendent than that. So hopefully these 7 common arguments I picked because they seem to happen all the time, and it seems that people who are new to the arguments always make them. And the only way, even if you're debating just to sharpen your mind, you're not going to do that by repeating the same arguments and making the same mistakes. You know, you have to do your own research at some point. Move on. So good luck to everybody. If somebody wants to respond, comment, and if I have time, I'll be happy to reply.